Hey folks, in this video, let's talk about the slow march of India's exports to $1 trillion mark. Recently, India's international trade figures were released for the financial year that ended in March 2025. There were quite a few positive developments. Three things that stood out to me were record iPhone exports, record pharma exports, and record remittances received by India. So, starting from a top level for the financial year that just ended, India's total exports, goods and services combined, hit an all time high of $820 billion. Think it was 5% growth over the previous financial year. India's total export number is inching ever so closer to that $1 trillion mark. And I wanted to check or forecast when might India be able to achieve that feat? So I looked up the export figures for the last 10 financial years from 2015 to the financial year that just ended. You can see the breakdown between goods exports and services exports. One thing that stands out right away is goods exports have gone from roughly $300 billion to some 450. They have grown in 10 years, but not as much as what you see with services. Services exports, which used to be around $150 billion, are almost touching $400 billion now. So, anyways, if you look at the breakdown of goods and services exports, we notice that if you look at the data for last 10 years, goods exports have been growing at around 4% each year, not that great, whereas services exports 9% each year. Just looking at these numbers, we can say that Indians are twice as good at delivering value through services as they are with delivering value through manufacturing. Overall, total exports have been growing at 6% each year. So, if we assume that the same growth rate will continue, goods exports will continue to grow at 4%, services at 9%, then we can see two things happening. Currently, India's goods exports are higher than its services exports. But by financial year 2028, we may come to a point where India's services exports pass India's goods exports to be the highest export category. And by financial year 2029, we might get to a point where total exports will cross the magical $1 trillion mark. So, when the BJP led NDA will go for their re election campaign in 2029, sometime in April, May, they are likely to use this feat as one of their major achievements. But who knows what will happen? These are just projections. What in just last 5 6 years we have seen pandemic related disruptions, then Russia Ukraine war related shocks, and now tariff related uncertainties. So we'll see what happens. But it would be good to see India's exports going from $500 billion to $1 trillion, doubling in about 15 years. If you look at India's economy, it's doubling at every 10 years, whereas exports look like they are doubling at 15 years. So exports are a little slow to catch up. Now, on to the things that stood out to me regarding India's exports. First, India's iPhone exports for the financial year 2025 hit an all time high of $22 billion. More importantly, now around 20% of all Apple's iPhones are assembled in India. Second, India's pharma exports also hit an all time high of $30 billion, 10% higher than the fiscal year before. Also, note that almost a third of the pharma exports now go to the United States. And finally, India's remittances hit a record $130 billion. This is the third year in a row that India has received remittances more than $100 billion. No other nation has done that. Now, previously, we forecasted that by financial year 2029, our goods and services exports combined will hit $1 trillion mark. By the same year, it is expected that India's remittances will breach $150 billion mark. I know remittances are not exports, but this is the money that overseas Indians send back home to support families, for personal investments, and so on. They can only do that because they are adding value to the economies of the nations they are working in. They are able to send part of their surplus income back to India. In a way, these overseas Indians are the export of India's human capital. In return, India gets over $100 billion each year. So, in addition to India's goods exports, services exports, remittances can be looked at as a byproduct of India's human capital export. On the flip side, if these people were to stay back in India, they might have added even more value to the Indian economy. There are over 18 million Indians, almost 2 crore Indians that are working outside India. Every year, hundreds of thousands of Indians leave India for college or higher education and for overseas work opportunities. Is it India's failure then to create the right educational environment, work environment, living environment where people want to stay in the country? Or is it India's success that it is exporting part of its brain power, muscle power to such a large extent? Or is it a bit of both? I hope you found this analysis interesting. I'll speak with you again next week. Until then, take care.